On a sweltering afternoon in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in the presidential palace, the silence of the empty halls amplifying the weight of his responsibilities. The young leader, barely 7 months into his presidency, stared at a file on his antique wooden desk, its contents threatening to reshape the future of Burkina Faso. The ceiling fan above spun lazily, casting flickering shadows across the room as the heat pressed in from outside. Most of the palace staff had left for the day, leaving Traoré to wrestle with the discovery that had landed in his hands just hours earlier. During a routine renovation of the National Treasury Room, workers had stumbled upon a hidden panel, untouched for decades. Behind it, they found a sealed metal box, its surface tarnished but intact. Inside were documents that had been deliberately concealed, meant to remain forgotten. Mr. President, his aide had said, voice trembling as he delivered the box, the workers thought you should see this immediately. Now, as Traoré sifted through the contents, his pulse quickened. The most significant item was a map of Burkina Faso, but it was unlike any he had seen before. This one detailed vast gold deposits in the northern regions, Jibwa, Gurma Mountains, places long dismissed as barren or too dangerous for exploration. These were reserves never recorded in official surveys, never disclosed to international mining companies, and never mentioned in government reports. Handwritten notes in the margins, penned by former President Thomas Sankara, assassinated in 1987, sent a chill through Traoré. The words were stark: "This is our true power. Show no one. Their knowledge of this would be the end of our freedom. When the time is right, when a leader of courage emerges, this will be Burkina Faso's path to true independence." Traoré rubbed his eyes, exhaustion mingling with disbelief. If this map was accurate, and Sankara was not known for exaggeration, the gold reserves were at least 3 times larger than what the world believed Burkina Faso possessed. This wasn't a minor oversight, it was a revelation that could catapult one of the world's poorest nations into a position of regional power. Schools, hospitals, roads, and bridges could be built. Crippling debts to foreign institutions could be erased. The cycle of dependency that had shackled Burkina Faso since its independence could finally be broken. The soft creak of the door interrupted his thoughts. Ouedraogo, his young economic advisor, entered, carrying a stack of reports. Seeing the president's intense focus on the map, he hesitated. "Sir, I've brought the IMF assessment you requested, but I see you're occupied with something else." Traoré weighed his options. In his short time as president, he had learned to trust sparingly. Western intelligence agencies had infiltrated the government, their influence lingering from decades of neocolonial control. But Ouedraogo had proven his loyalty, rejecting lucrative offers from French companies to serve his country. "Come look at this, Yakuba," Traoré said, gesturing him closer. "Tell me what you see." Ouedraogo leaned over the desk, his eyes scanning the map. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock as the implications sank in. "Mr. President, this is. Is this accurate? It bears Sankara's signature and seal. He was many things, but never a man to fabricate something of this magnitude." His finger traced the marked gold deposits, Jibwa, Gurma, regions the government had been told were either resource poor or too dangerous due to insurgent activity. Traoré noted the coincidence. These were also areas where French special forces maintained a heavy presence, ostensibly for counter-terrorism operations. The two men exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. "We must verify this," Ouedraogo said, breaking the silence. "We need to examine these regions, take samples, confirm what the map suggests." Traoré nodded. "And we must keep this absolutely secret. If word gets out before we're ready," he didn't need to finish. They both knew the stakes. Western powers had toppled governments for far less. "Assemble a small team," Traoré instructed. "People you would trust with your life. We need a geologist, someone untainted by Western mining interests." Ouedraogo didn't hesitate. "Dr. Zita. He studied in Russia, returned to serve Burkina Faso despite offers from major corporations. His loyalty is to our soil, not foreign paychecks." "Good," Traoré said. We leave in 3 days. No official motorcade, no security detail that could draw attention. We travel as civilians to Jibwa first. As Ouedraogo left to make discreet arrangements, Traoré turned back to the map. If it was real, it explains so much: the assassinations, the coups, the persistent foreign military presence, the exploitative mining contracts forced upon Burkina Faso during times of crisis. Sankara had known, and they had killed him for it. 3 days later, before dawn painted the sky over Ouagadougou, Traoré slipped out of the presidential residence through a service entrance. Dressed in a plain shirt, jeans, and a cap pulled low, he could have passed for any ordinary Burkinabe. A nondescript SUV waited, engine humming. Inside were Ouedraogo, Dr. Zita with his geological equipment, and 2 trusted military officers in civilian clothes, Captain Ouedraogo and Lieutenant Ouedraogo. "All preparations are complete, Mr. President," Ouedraogo reported as they pulled away. "We've created a cover story about you being ill and resting for the day. Only the Prime Minister knows your actual whereabouts." Traoré nodded. "The journey to Jibwa will take about 5 hours if we avoid checkpoints." Dar. "Zita, are you confident you can conduct preliminary tests on site?" The geologist, a serious man in his 50s with gray-flecked hair and calloused hands, patted his equipment case. "I've brought portable X-ray fluorescence analyzers and sampling tools. We won't have lab-grade results, but I can confirm the presence and approximate concentration of gold deposits." The journey north was tense. They stuck to secondary roads to avoid military checkpoints, especially those where French advisors might be stationed. The landscape shifted from the urban sprawl of the capital to savanna, then to the arid, rocky terrain of Burkina Faso's northern provinces. Jibwa had been labeled a security risk zone for years, with international travel advisories warning against visits. Even government officials rarely ventured there without heavy military escorts. Yet, as they passed through small villages, Traoré saw not a hotbed of terrorism but communities grappling with poverty and neglect. "These villages see more French soldiers than government services," Captain Ouedraogo remarked as they drove past a settlement where children played in dusty yards and women carried water from distant wells. By mid-afternoon, they reached the coordinates marked on Sankara's map, a rocky stretch of land surrounded by low hills. To the untrained eye, it was unremarkable, indistinguishable from countless other landscapes in the Sahel. Nothing hinted at the wealth beneath. "This is it," Dr. Zita confirmed, cross-referencing the map with his GPS. They parked in the shadow of an outcropping, setting up a small camp that could pass for a routine geological survey team. Dr. Zita began collecting soil and rock samples while the others maintained a watchful perimeter. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, a dust cloud in the distance signaled an approaching vehicle. Captain Ouedraogo raised his binoculars. "Local vehicle," he reported. "An old pickup truck, 2 occupants." Tension eased slightly, but hands stayed near concealed weapons. The truck stopped a respectful distance away, and an elderly man emerged, leaning on a wooden staff, followed by a younger man, likely his grandson. "Visitors are rare in these parts," the old man called out in Moor, the local language, especially important visitors who disguise themselves as ordinary men. Traoré exchanged glances with his team. How had this man recognized him despite his civilian attire? Stepping forward, he chose honesty. "We're conducting a geological survey," he said in Moor. The old man smiled, revealing missing teeth. "The president of Burkina Faso does not travel to Jibwa in secret for a routine survey." He gestured to the landscape. "You've come for what lies beneath, have you not? What has been hidden from your people for generations?" Stunned silence fell over the group. The elderly man approached with surprising agility. "I am Bationo," he introduced himself. "My grandfather was a spiritual leader in this region during the French occupation. Come to our village. It's not safe to stay in the open as night approaches, and there are things you should know." Against the security officer's reservations, Traoré decided to follow Bationo to his village, a cluster of traditional homes about 4 kilometers away. Children ran alongside their vehicles, curious, while adults emerged from their homes, sensing the significance of the visit. They were led to the village's central meeting place, where elders had gathered as if expecting them. A meal was prepared, and Traoré was invited to sit in the place of honor. Protocol demanded he conceal his identity, but the villagers clearly knew who he was. "How did you know who I am?" he asked Badiono directly. The old man, who Traoré now realized must be over 100, smiled. "The soil speaks in ways the French never understood. When a true son of the soil moves, the soil knows." As night fell and lanterns cast a warm glow over the gathering, Badiono shared a story passed down through generations. "The French discovered gold here in 1953, he began, his voice strong despite his age. Their geologists found what they called the mother lode, a deposit so vast it would have made our country one of the richest in the region. But colonial powers do not make colonies rich. They extract wealth and leave poverty." He explained how the French colonial administration had classified the discovery as a state secret, planning to exploit it only after securing control mechanisms to prevent the wealth from fueling independence movements. One French geologist, Duval, had a change of heart. Having lived among the Burkinabe and married a local woman, he revealed the truth to the village elders and helped create maps documenting the gold deposits. When independence came in 1960, these maps were secretly passed to the new government, but successive leaders were either corrupted or threatened into silence. Only Thomas Sankara had planned to use the knowledge to break free from neocolonial control, a plan cut short by his assassination. "Our elders have been guardians of this secret," Badiono said, looking at Traoré. "Waiting for a leader who would use this wealth not for personal gain, but for the true liberation of our people." Dr. Zita interrupted, his excitement palpable. "Mr. President, the preliminary results from my samples, the gold concentration is extraordinary. If these readings are consistent, we're looking at one of the largest gold deposits in Africa." A murmur rippled through the gathering. Traoré felt the weight of history and possibility pressing down on him. Before he could respond, Captain Sawadogo rushed in from the perimeter, where he had been monitoring communications. "Mr. President, we're picking up unusual radio traffic. French Special Forces units are mobilizing from their base in Ouagadougou, citing intelligence about terrorist movement in this exact region. They're deploying helicopter units." The revelation chilled the group. It couldn't be a coincidence. How could they know? Ouedraogo asked. "We have a leak," Traoré said grimly. "Someone in the palace must have observed our departure or accessed information about our journey." Badiono raised his hand for silence. "There is another way to Ouagadougou," he said. "Ancient paths known only to our people. No French helicopter will find you there." Within minutes, they were moving again, following Badiono's grandson through the darkness along barely visible trails winding through ravines and dense acacia groves. The distant thump of helicopter rotors echoed behind them as they left the village. The journey back to the capital took all night, traveling on foot and borrowed motorcycles through impassable terrain that yielded to local knowledge. By dawn, they reached a small farming community outside Ouagadougou, where a loyal minister waited with vehicles to transport them back to the palace through service entrances. Upon returning, Traoré learned that French special forces had conducted a counter-terrorism operation in Djibouti, targeting the village they had just left. The official statement mentioned intelligence about a high-level terrorist meeting, with no reference to geological surveys or gold. Traoré convened his most trusted advisors in a secure room swept for surveillance devices, Security Chief Ouedraogo, Finance Minister Traoré, and Defense Minister Sankara, named in honor of the late president. Spreading Sankara's map on the table, Traoré said, "The situation is clear. This map shows gold reserves that could transform our nation, but the French have learned of our discovery and will do everything to prevent us from accessing these resources." "How did they find out so quickly?" Traoré asked. "We have a leak," Ouedraogo replied. "Someone close to us is working for foreign interests." Traoré nodded. "We need to identify the traitor, but more importantly, we must secure these gold reserves before it's too late." Defense Minister Sankara leaned forward. The French will intensify their presence in these regions. They'll fabricate security concerns, pressure us through international bodies, perhaps even attempt to destabilize the government. Then we move faster than they expect, Traoré said. I'm announcing a national resource sovereignty initiative tomorrow. We'll declare all undocumented mineral deposits as national treasures under direct presidential protection. Traoré looked concerned. The international backlash will be severe. Sanctions, banking restrictions, loan cancellations. Traoré remained calm. Our agreements with China and Russia will sustain us through the initial shock. Once we begin extracting this gold, we'll have leverage no Western power can ignore. As the meeting ended, Traoré kept Ouedraogo behind. Find the leak, Maurice. Whoever betrayed us is still close, still listening. Ouedraogo nodded. I already have my suspicions, Mr. President. That night, unable to sleep, Traoré stood on his balcony overlooking the capital. The city lights flickered like the gold beneath the soil, wealth hidden from the people who owned it. His phone rang, an encrypted line known only to a select few. Mr. President, Ouedraogo's voice was tense, we've identified the source of the leak. You won't believe who it is. The next morning, French Ambassador Jean-Michel Durand arrived at the palace for what he thought was a routine meeting. Instead, he faced Traoré and several military officers, their expressions grim. Ambassador Durand, Traoré said coldly, can you explain why your special forces were in Djibouti yesterday, precisely where I was conducting a confidential state visit? Durand maintained his composure. Counter-terrorism operations, Mr. President. Standard procedure under our security agreement. We had intelligence about extremist elements. Traoré slid a folder across the table. Then perhaps you can explain these intercepted communications between your embassy and Paris, mentioning gold deposits, geological surveys, and plans to secure the area before I could. Durand's face paled slightly. I'm not familiar with these communications. Of course not, Traoré said. Just as you're not familiar with the monthly payments to my Deputy Minister of Mines, Matteo Traoré, who has been sharing state secrets with your intelligence service for the past year. On cue, the door opened, and Traoré was brought in, flanked by security officers. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man whose double life had collapsed. Matteo has been very cooperative, Traoré continued. He's provided details of every meeting, every document shared, every French plan to maintain control over our resources. Durand straightened his tie, attempting to regain composure. Mr. President, I suggest we discuss this diplomatically. Our countries have a long-standing relationship. Yes, Traoré interrupted, a relationship where you take, and we give. That ends today. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. In 1 hour, I will address the nation. I will reveal the true extent of Burkina Faso's gold reserves, announce the immediate nationalization of all undocumented mineral deposits, and present evidence of your government's attempts to undermine our sovereignty. Durand's diplomatic veneer cracked. You can't do this. The economic consequences, the consequences of not doing it would be far worse, Traoré said. My people living in poverty while sitting on mountains of gold. No more. As the ambassador was escorted out, Traoré turned to Ouedraogo. They will retaliate. Prepare for everything, coup attempts, economic sanctions, international isolation. Ouedraogo nodded. We're ready, sir. 1 hour later, Ibrahim Traoré stood before the cameras, addressing the nation and the world. Behind him hung the flag of Burkina Faso, red for the revolution, green for abundance, and a yellow star for mineral wealth, a symbolism now imbued with new meaning. Citizens of Burkina Faso, he began, his voice steady, today, I bring you news that will change the course of our history. For decades, the true wealth of our nation has been hidden from us, kept secret by those who wish to control us through poverty and dependence. He held up Sankara's map, now verified by Dr. Zita's findings. This document, created during colonial times and preserved by patriots, reveals gold deposits 3 times larger than officially recorded, gold that belongs to you, the people of Burkina Faso. His voice grew stronger. For too long, foreign powers have maintained the fiction that our nation is poor, that we need their aid, their loans, their expertise, all while knowing the truth. Beneath our soil lies enough wealth to build schools, hospitals, infrastructure, to free us from foreign debt and control. Today, I declare all these resources as national treasures under the protection of the state. No foreign corporation will extract this wealth without fair compensation to our people. No foreign government will dictate how we use our God-given resources. As he spoke, encrypted documents were released online, detailing decades of foreign interference, from colonial cover-ups to modern-day espionage. The broadcast reached every corner of Burkina Faso, from the villages of Djibouti to the urban centers of Ouagadougou. In the streets, people gathered around radios and televisions, their faces a mix of disbelief and hope. For the first time in generations, they saw a future where their nation's wealth would serve them, not foreign powers. In the days that followed, the international reaction was swift. Western nations issued statements condemning Traoré's reckless nationalization plans, warning of economic consequences. Sanctions were threatened, and banking restrictions loomed. But Traoré had anticipated this. Quietly, he had secured trade agreements with China and Russia, ensuring Burkina Faso could weather the storm. Within weeks, Dr. Zita's team confirmed the full extent of the gold deposits, and plans for state-controlled mining operations began. The villages of Djibouti saw government investment for the first time in decades. Schools, clinics, and water systems, funded by the promise of the gold beneath their feet. Back in the palace, Traoré stood on his balcony, watching the city lights. The weight of leadership remained heavy, but now it was tempered by a sense of possibility. The soil of Burkina Faso had spoken, and its people were ready to claim what was theirs. The path ahead would be fraught, foreign powers would not relinquish their influence easily, but for the first time, Burkina Faso held the power to chart its own destiny. And Ibrahim Traoré, guided by the legacy of Sankara and the wisdom of elders like Badiono, was determined to lead his nation toward true independence.